I hope you're ready for another informal video. More or less, I'm waiting on next week to start my lines or my narration for the Veil Rider chapter. The next chapter after this one, lines are already out to the voice actors, so we're kind of like getting them all together. It's a process. But I was on the server last night, and someone said, "Man, your works." I'm talking to him about the I'm kind of teasing out the next bits and pieces and the main overall arcing lore of the two book series, and the term grimdark keeps being used, or edgy, and there's something about the word grimdark that I believe does not really encapsulate what I'm really going for, because I've heard it over and over again, like guard your stuff is so grimdark, and I'm like, it's not grimdark, because when I think grimdark, I think of 40K. In my experience and my understanding, the term grimdark comes from the grim darkness of the 41st millennium. It's Games Workshop's main gig, and I'm pretty sure it's where that term came from. And grimdark has become this kind of empty thing. Like when something is grimdark to me, there's only destruction with no purpose. It's the extreme side of changing, the resolution, subverting expectations of your readers, and that's not really what I'm going for. I like a good twist or two, but there's no blatant and almost cruel subversion of expectations, which is one thing 40K, and I think the biggest one's J.R.R. Martin, where the death, the destruction, it's baseless. It doesn't really do anything. It doesn't give to the story or give to the narrative. There's no sense of belonging and sacrifice to some of the deaths that most grimdark stories have. Grimdark to me is a story that's cruel just to be cruel, just to drag you along the dirt. And it's kind of why most 40K novels are so bad, because they're so grimdark, they're no longer fun to read. One thing I've noticed about getting reviews back from books and reading book reviews is that if you don't balance the loss and the hardship, the book becomes boring. It's why really good, proper hooray stories are boring. If the good guy always wins, then why you want to read? You know how the book ends. If good always triumphs over evil with no losses, no one dies, happy ending, there's a reason why they're stories for children and why they're not really a story for adults. There has to be suffering, but the suffering must be crafted elegantly. It has to be suffering with meaning, suffering with reward. It's a really hard thing to balance. In the Discord last night, we were like, you know what? I'm gonna make my own word, because grimdark, I don't like, because I don't believe my works are grimdark, and it's the other terms they have that for like something dark or something grim. I don't want to be anything near those things, because they all have the same connotations. If someone labels your work as grimdark, people go into that story with expectations already laid in place. And I don't believe, like I said before, grimdark fits these two stories. So last night we're going through, and I'm trying to find a word that fits how I believe I write, my writing style, my storytelling style. And then I started looking at the German, which is always fun, because the Germans, they just combine shit to make new words, like fly, like a bat. Nah, it's a flying mouse, Fledermaus. It's a great language. Now I'm looking, and I see Hoffnungkrieg or Hofkrieg, and if I'm correct, because I have German viewers probably like fucking cringing right now, but Hoffnungkrieg or Hofkrieg roughly translates, as far as I'm aware, into War of Hope, and that's what I like the most about the word, War of Hope, as in like that's hard to explain, isn't it? So with a War of Hope, a Hoffnungkrieg or Hofkrieg, you struggle through the bad to it while you do it with the hope that things will be better. Like like a example of a Hoffnungkrieg would be like after like a really hard, horrible battle, or a horrible training session, or just a really, really bad day. You woke up late, you got to work late, you had a huge workload at work, your traffic on the way home, your favorite store was closed early for, there's all these horrible sequences of events. But then you finally get home, you take off your shoes, it's been a bad day, but there's just enough ice cream in the freezer to make a bowl. You sit down on your couch with your little bowl of strawberry ice cream, and then you turn on the TV and your favorite show's on. And as you're sitting there mulling over this bad day, no good, horrible bad day, you have these little things give you hope in the war for tomorrow. It's like being out in the field and it's raining, it's just pissing down rain, it's cold, your socks are wet, your boots are wet, you're pretty sure your soul is wet, but you got a hot cup of coffee in your hand. And you have the warmth from the cup and the taste of coffee on your lips and the warm steam, and you're looking out into the pissing rain, and it's this weird emotional flux. Like, if you guys want to experience a Hoffnungkrieg or a Hofkrieg, find a really cold day where it's raining and walk in that bitch for a bit, right? Get cold, get wet, get miserable, suffer out in the rain, and then when you get back home, you take off your wet clothes, you put on some nice warm socks, some warm pajamas to make you a hot cup of cocoa, and then feel like the torsion of the previous event and this new event. It's to me, my writing style, which I'm kind of dubbing Hoffnungkrieg, I guess, or War of Hope, is that no matter how bad things get, no matter how tough things can be, you do it in the hope that the next day, the next week, the next year will be better. Because when it comes to yearning and hoping for the better, you can't stop fighting through the bad. It's one of those things that Grimdark gets wrong. Most of the time, they don't even tell you what. Like a guardsman has a rough idea that he's fighting for the greater good or whatever, but it doesn't really. They don't really go into the real nitty gritty of why they do and who is doing so and what they believe. Like most main characters, they simply know I have to fight, but they don't really go into the deep personal yearning of why someone fights. And when they suffer, it seems like they suffer needlessly. A few books get it right here and there, we all know that. But when I take viewers on a ride, I'm sure you guys notice, I mix in these small scenes here and there to alleviate the suffering, to add the humanity back into these inhumane actions like combat and war and death and everything else, to remind the viewer that despite all these bad things, there is still good. And I try and do it in a way that's natural, that would happen. And it's hard trying to put into words how you want to write and how you want your viewer to feel in that writing. Like, I want my viewers to suffer alongside the characters, understand the suffering, understand the hardship and the pain and their emotional turmoil and why they do things and why they believe they do things, but also show the viewer that even in these hard times, the small things still matter. And that's why I think the term War of Hope or Hoffnungkrieg or Hofkrieg fits what I'm looking for. It's not grimdark, it's not edgy, it's just a fight in the hope that things will be better in the end. That the reason you're fighting is to make things better, and that after you're done fighting, you won't have to anymore. It's the or that, like for in the Bronze series, once they find the thing, everyone can go back to normal, and maybe, just maybe, all the suffering and terrible memories and nightmares will all be worth it in the end. Which, a lot of Grimdark, it's Grimdark for the sake of being Grimdark, and they just don't do it right. And it's why I don't like having Grimdark attached to my name. Why, last night we came up with a new name for it. So, like it says on old Wikipedia here, Grimdark is a subgenre of speculative fiction with a tone, style, or setting that is particularly dystopian, immoral, or violent. And most folks adhere right to the dystopian, amoral, and violent. They go in too far into it, and they just forget everything else. Like, I know some guy named Robert says Grimdark is anti-Tolkien approach in fantasy writing, because Tolkien, you all know who Tolkien is. Let's be quite clear here. But Grimdark, if done correctly, can be great stories. It really can. Hard fantasy or dark fantasy, but there must be a reason behind it. And while you can label me hard fantasy, dark fantasy, grimdark, I believe my writing style is more of a war of hope, a Hoffnungkrieg or Hoffkrieg. The stride forward through adversity and crushing defeat and everything else that comes with it, just in the vain human hope that in the end, hopefully, it'll all be worth it, that you can still find happiness, that maybe something good will come out of it. That's what I believe my writing style is. And I can go further on this, but the video would be like 1,000,000 minutes long. I'm probably just going to leave it here. But, yeah, so in the Discord, we talked about it. I don't believe grimdark is the right word for it. I don't really believe that grimdark is a good writing style or even a term you can put on most, but I think grimdark is overused. And when people use grimdark writing styles, they just go too heavy on it. There's no good balance to it. There's no meaning and reason behind X, Y, and Z are doing why they're doing, what their objectives are, and how things might change. Most grimdark is so deeply rooted, it's almost inhuman. They're doing it, but they're not evolving with their choices, and I just don't think that's right. And why I think my word better fits me. But that's just a quick rant from me. Go to the last channel behind me for the Discord link. And tonight we have a D&D game with Neckbeardia, where we're running the Belle Delphine campaign. And I'll be streaming on Neckbeardia's channel in about 3 hours, I think. 3-4 hours. And I got DM that shit. So, I'll see you guys there. Thanks for listening to my fucking ramblings. And until I see you next time on this side of the veil, this has been Guard Bro.